Thank you. How's that? Can people hear me now? They can. Brilliant. Right, Emily, we're live streaming, so I appreciate that. Now I'm getting feedback. Do me twice. It's not a bad thing. Obviously, I'm going to have problems like that. Oh, okay. Right, how's that? Oh, look, thank you. Appreciate that. That's good. Look, welcome everybody. And Liz and Linda, I think it's my first time to actually have met you folk in person. So it's been absolutely wonderful. I'm not certain when you got me on the committee, Stephen, but it must have been around about a year ago, perhaps just a wee bit under a year. So the fact that it's the first time we've met reflects the long-lasting impacts of COVID. So I'm grateful that you folk have hung in there and you're here today. So I appreciate that. And also, Emily, I've got some folk on the screen as well. G'day, Iona. How are you? That's good. Can you hear us okay, Iona? Brilliant. And Councillor Paul. Oh, and Councillor Paul. Great to have you here as well. That's superb. Appreciate it. And I look, even though some of us are here, I hope you folk feel very much part of the meeting and please make certain you have your chance to be engaged with us as well, which would be great. I wonder if, as we get into the meeting, I'd like to start with the karakia. And I understand actually convention is, rather than me just saying it, that I invite you all to join me in it. So that would be great, please.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he ho, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you very much for that. It's a great karakia, and I always think of that last line, a promise of a glorious day, and without wanting to be trite about a very good karakia, I hope our committee has a good glorious day. We've got a great agenda. Thank you, Stephen, to you and the rest of the team, the many people that are here for what are a good set of papers. And I think it's fair to say, Linda and Roy, we were just having a coffee before, and we were complimentary of staff about the way and direction of travel of the papers. So it gives us a good meeting and a good basis to have a risk-based discussion. So thank you to all that have been involved. Do we have any apologies at this stage? Liz has told me that it's... Oh, g'day, Iona.
Thanks, Bruce. Look, sorry, I'll be on my phone for half an hour listening in because I've just got to do something. But then I'll be back at about 3:30. About 2:30. So hopefully we can get through a lot before then.
Oh, that's the second councillor suggests to me that this is not a big agenda. I'm sure it's a big one. And Liz, I've noted you'll be out at 4:30, which probably means I will be too. Oh, before 4:30. Oh, okay. Oh, heaven help me. I'm going backwards here. That's great. So look, we could just move from the chair that we sustain the apology, particularly of Iona. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jenny. All those in favour, please press their green buttons. Is that right? Yes. Those against, if they could press the red. We're right there, guys. You've captured that. Okay. Does that show somewhere? Oh, up there. Wow. Actually, bad form. Look, in fairness, Andy advised me he was going to be in and out. So unless anybody's really going to kick me up on procedure, can we just note in the motion that the Mayor has also indicated that he will be in and out of the meeting at some stage. Right, are there any declarations of interest that we need to be aware of? Roy, I invite you to...
I have a potential conflict of interest in item, where is it now? 3.2, as I'm in the process, and I thought it would discussion with the chair. It's better that I don't stay for that particular item.
Thank you for that, Roy. Yes, Roy, if I can just endorse that, Roy and I have had a couple of conversations, and his position is he would feel more comfortable not being in the room, and so at the right stage, Roy, I will invite you to leave, but please don't go because we want you back. Okay, rightio. That'd be great. So if we could just recognise that, that will be fine. We have in our board books the minutes of our last meeting. And from the chair, I will move that we approve those minutes. They're the 2nd of February, seems like a long time ago, given we had a couple of workshops in between, haven't we? From the 2nd of February 2022. And I'll move that they're taken as an accurate and true record of the meeting. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Linda. Right, are there any discussion to that motion? Is any matters of accuracy or your recollection of that meeting? Looked like the one I was in. We okay? In that case, I'll put the motion, please. Again, all those in favour, please vote accordingly to your little thingy here. What do we call it? Anybody give me a remote? Yeah, it's a good name, isn't it? It's a remote. Well done. Okay, I'm technically challenged on these things. Right. Oh, are you right there, Liz? Oh, you were voting against us, were you, Liz? Okay, right. I'm glad we're all there. Right, I haven't been informed of any items that aren't on the agenda. Stephen, is there anything, or Emily, that I should be aware of to allow for? Oh, no, I thought you were about to say there was a 3-hour item that we had to add to it, so we don't. I haven't been informed of any public participation at this stage, so I propose that we move to general business, and our first paper is item 2.1, which is our self-assessment survey. And Richard, I think you're going to lead us on this one, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully this paper is self-explanatory. I think it's the first time this subcommittee has self-evaluated its effectiveness. It's a sign of maturity of the committee that it's doing that. It's always good practice, I think, for any committee to do this, but it's recommended good practice by the Office of the Auditor General. We've tailored the set of questions. It'll be run through Microsoft Forms, easy to answer. Don't need a great deal of technological skill to do that. And the intention is that the survey results will be presented back to the subcommittee in the September meeting, and any recommendations to be considered by incoming council will then be available.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, Jenny.
Thank you, Richard. I was just looking at the questions and was wondering, like, we've got a couple of questions that specifically look at the internally external audit and other matters, but I was wondering why we didn't specifically pull out maybe risk management or health and safety, given that those are two areas where I think we've actually we've really been on a maturity journey as a committee on the time that I've been here, and I think it would be useful to kind of see whether people feel like that's paying off.
Okay. As opposed to having a consolidated question which covers off every part.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned with a consolidated question that it's kind of, it becomes a bit of a vibe check rather than kind of helps people to kind of to dive into specific areas of our responsibilities.
Okay. That would be an easy fix, particularly separating out risk management and the health and safety in particular.
Those were the two that jumped out to me. Yeah.
Richard, I like that idea. I mean, it's part of, if I can say, my little short journey with the committee as well, that we start to pick up those things. And certainly out of the workshop on health and safety, there was still this question about where is the right direction for it. So I think it would be good for us to explore those two questions. So I presume that's not a big hassle, mate. You've got to work through.
I can do that.
Cracker. Okay. Are there any other? Did I see Iona with your hand up, please, Iona?
Thank you. So I think this is a great idea. A couple of questions, Richard. I presume these results will be public?
I would have that intention, Iona. I think it's we're doing the assessment in public. It should certainly be public in its final form at the very least.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, just because I'm flicking between screens, the asset management, just given the risk later in papers is seen as being very severe. Asset management plans. Will that be asked about too?
In terms of the assessment survey?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so, to be honest, Iona. I think that if we follow Jenny's lead, that we have a couple of sections broken out around health and safety and strategic risk management, that gives us that chance, bearing in mind and thinking through what we've got going forward with our agenda today, Iona. So no, the answer's no, sorry.
Yeah, I would have thought, Iona, that asset management is more of an infrastructure and then a long-term plan issue rather than necessarily a key issue. I mean, it's a key risk for this committee, as all the key risks are for this committee, but in terms of reference.
And yes, I'd just say that asset management is one of our strategic risks, so it's broadly covered under that.
That's my point.
Response.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, you've made the point better than I have. Thanks, Stephen.
I guess just given it's seen as being such a high risk, I possibly respectfully don't entirely agree with that perspective, but anyway, we can discuss that later in another paper. And I was just wondering, Richard, too, about, I think it's good to look at ourselves about whether more training is required and available to members.
Yeah, Richard, I like that idea.
Yeah.
That might be another. We want to. I'm very happy if we were to try to add that. Are we well enough ourselves educated in terms of the area of risk? I think that would be a good area to explore. So there'll be 3 additional questions at this stage. That's not going to blow us out too much, is it? To keep that balance between being succinct and not too hard to fill out.
And I guess just the point is doing something about it rather than just a question as well. And just the last question, sorry, is anyone actually going to evaluate us rather than us just looking at ourselves? Which is what it looks like.
The survey goes wider than just the members around this table.
Yeah.
It's also the executive leadership team will be responding to the survey. All councillors as well, sorry, yes.
Obviously not everyone will respond potentially because they've got other things to do. Okay.
And we'll split the survey so you can see which results have come from the executive versus members.
I have asked Iona for the net relatively to be wide. I mean, we are a subcommittee. We are doing this for our colleagues, elected member colleagues. We need to have a sense that actually our work is of value to them. If it's not, we need to change something.
Right.
But actually, I'm also conscious that the phraseology I use is that we are risk governors. Our colleagues at executive leadership team are risk managers. Our work should be aiding and assisting them in the area of risk management. So I struggle to see how we would assess the committee without actually also asking ELT, bravely perhaps, actually what they think of our work. So I'm keen to take all comers on this one. It'll give us a baseline, won't it, Richard?
Yes,
and we can work out some strategies, but such as, for instance, your point, Iona, around education, if that's needed.
Yeah, and I guess, so you think that this wide net, this list of people, there'll be people who are also well informed enough to make a comment?
That's part of the discovery. Yes,
Okay.
they're well informed and they are people all capable of making a comment. Let's see what it goes, see what comes out of it.
And there is a don't know option if somebody doesn't know.
That's right, and in this case, the don't know option might well be very compelling and telling for us as a committee. Okay, are there any other questions folk would like to raise or points? So I think, Richard, we've got 3 new questions to add. You're comfortable that's not going to kill us?
No, I think it says the survey will take approximately 4 minutes. That might stretch it out.
It's a rather black and white kill us. That's not a good phrase, is it? Sorry, it won't challenge us to affect the effectiveness of the survey, which is superb. Well, that's great. So thank you for following through on that one, Richard. I certainly am very comfortable that be the case.
Okay, thank you.
I'd move from the chair, therefore, that we better check my resolutions here, that we receive your report, Richard, thank you. And I think we can get rid of number 2 because we have indeed recommended the changes. I don't think we need to recognise that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jenny. Is any discussion on the motion? There being none, take your remote. I've learnt a new word today, and please vote accordingly. Thank you. Well done, Roy. That's good. Okay, thank you. We can take that then as having voted. If we could move then to item 2.2, which is our Assurance and Business Integrity Plan, this great paper. Phyllis, appreciate your presence today, and I look forward to your lead. Thank you.
There we go. Cool. So, kia ora koutou, everyone. So just going to briefly introduce this paper, if that's okay. So this paper has two main parts. Just the first bit is about the audit plan for the coming year, and the second bit is just an update on the elected member gifts declaration process. So in terms of the audit plan itself, this has been done based on a risk assessment, an audit risk assessment. So we've looked at, among other things, the last time we audited an area, any issues or key changes within that process. For this year, we are going to focus quite a bit on the operational side of things, including some of our sites that we haven't actually been to for quite a while, including the cemeteries, the marinas, Toi Puniki. We'll also be looking at some of the things that we usually look at in terms of legislative compliance, and looking at some of the ongoing advisory work that will cover things that, such as the financial upgrade or the key projects that look at improving the internal control environment of the organisation. So I guess the audit plan is out there for any feedback from this committee, and of course, like if there's any changes during the year, we would bring this back to the committee for additions to the plan, etc. We've got about 9% set aside for any responsive reviews, so hopefully we should be able to respond to any requests from management on that. So that's the first part of the paper. The second part of the paper, good news, since we've put up this paper, we had 100% in terms of completion rate. So we didn't. So everybody's had made their declaration. So we're really good and really pleased with that. So I thought I mentioned that, even though my paper sounds quite bad. So yeah. Any questions?
Thank you for that, Phyllis. That's really superb and good news on the response front. Members, are there any questions you'd like to ask Phyllis at this stage? Jenny? Oh, thank you. Oh, Tamasa, before you go, please.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, Phyllis, for that introduction. I just wanted to, I know this is not speeches and I'm just going to get to my question, but I just wanted to also thank you for your consistent use of te tiriti throughout the paper as opposed to the treaty. They're different documents. Anyway, my question was, with the gift declaration stuff and the way that your team gets feedback from elected members, I wonder if emailing is the best way to do that, and whether you guys had explored maybe having like a standing, like quarterly, I don't know, meeting with councillors and elected members, or something face to face with elected members, because I just wondered whether you'd get more of a return if you met with people in person and had some time in their diary as opposed to the emails, because I know those emails do get buried and lost in elected members' inboxes. But I just wondered what alternatives you might have explored to getting that stuff from councillors.
Yeah, so one of the alternatives for this round is the elected members did do a ring around with the elected members that they are working with. So we didn't just rely on email. So I think we did a call around for those who we haven't heard back from. But yeah, open to suggestions from the committee.
Thank you for that. Is there any other questions? Yes, Jenny.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions about the proposed audits, some of the proposed audits for the year. I was just interested in the one about the facilities management contract and kind of what's the background to that, and why that's been put on the list and what we're going to be looking at.
Cool. Facilities management is a key area for us to get right. It's how we maintain and manage our facilities. Sorry, that sounds obvious. And we have a new facilities contract in place about, I think, maybe a year and a bit now. So this is looking at how operationally effective it is. And we know that there have been some teething issues as well, so this would be a good time to go in to look and understand the noise from the facts as well as how we could improve in terms of if we ever do this again. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
Thank you. The only thing I wanted to add is I know that when we did bring that contract on, one of the things that we were enthusiastic about was that it was going to provide more asset management data. So it would be great for the review to kind of follow up whether that's been one of the benefits that we've seen, and if not, how we can move that forward, given that we've already talked about asset management being a critical risk today. I was also interested in the one about creative spaces, and you mentioned in your introduction Toi Pōneke. I was just not really clear what was included in creative spaces, because to me that could have meant like venues, it could have meant community centres, it could have meant a lot of things.
We are thinking of Toi Pōneke specifically. We just kept it broad just because in case there were other creative spaces that we might not be aware of, given that we haven't done the detailed scoping yet. But at this stage we are focusing on Toi Pōneke's operations.
Thank you. And then last one, I was just interested in the one about customer complaints and the complaints process. Again, kind of, can you give us some background about why that's ended up on the list and what we're hoping to learn there?
Cool. This, as far as we know, there isn't a burning issue or anything in the complaint space. This is just one area that is good that we haven't looked at in a while, and it's good that we know for us to know whether we are actually, engaging well with our customers. Be able to, respond, logging, KPIs, etc., and all that in terms of are we responding to the requests, and for any specific complaints or escalated complaints, are we actually dealing with those well? Because I would imagine we get a lot of inquiries and a lot of complaints, so how do we then escalate the ones that need to be escalated to dealt with appropriately?
Great. I think elected members would be very enthusiastic with that, because unsurprisingly, when people are really unhappy, they tend to end up in our inboxes.
Yeah.
So I think that's somewhere we would be really interested to, there'll be a lot of political interest in seeing the results of that. So I think it's great we're looking into that. Thank you.
Jenny, does anybody else have questions they'd like to raise? Yes, Roy.
I'm not sure whether my papers were put together properly, but I've got 3 copies of the detailed assurance plan for 21-22.
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I think it's 22.
Yeah.
23.
But for some reason I got 3 copies of it in my papers. Anyway. Sorry?
Missing all the others.
I'm missing all the others. One question about the 9%. Wait, Richard knows I'm going to ask this question. Do you really think that's enough? My experience over the years is that 20% is closer to what happens in reality. And it should do, because you should be right up with the issues, and the issues don't necessarily manifest themselves at this stage for the next year. So they will arise during the year.
Yeah. I think 9% is actually a little bit higher than what we had last year, which was only 5%. We are quite tight in terms of in terms of margin, and so far I think we have been able to respond to those requests. What we've done is we reprioritized our existing work plan, either to scope it in a way that would still meet the objective, just kind of scale it a little bit, just in order to meet those objectives, and to kind of balance out the work we do as well as the resources we have available.
Okay, and one more question, you may want to take it later, but the recommendation is that this committee approves the work plan. I'm not sure that a subcommittee can actually approve. You may want to recommend to give a finance.
I
think it's within the terms of reference for this subcommittee to approve it, so it's got the delegation to do that.
It has.
It would be logical for us to have it, Roy, on the basis that this is an important, I guess, part in which we as a governing body can get and drive our desire, along with management's, for assurance over key matters. It would be logical for us to do it. Rather than higher up, because it's within this committee. And Stephen, if you've said it's within the terms, I'll take that as good advice. So we can approve.
perfectly happy with that. If
Yeah,
it's,
I'm very happy that we do it that way.
Reference,
Yeah.
but it is sometimes not the case of a subcommittee making a decision, but recommending that
Yes, I understand that.
the next committee up the line approves.
I'm very comfortable that we can make that approval, Roy, so as long as you're happy to vote ultimately that way, I'm going to suggest that you do. Yes. No, thank you. A good question. I don't want to trample on toes, but it's logical that that an Audit and Risk Committee would approve the internal audit plan.
Yep. Yep.
Any other questions people like to raise? I've got a couple, if that's okay, please, Phyllis. Look, I like it well. One of the things that it's a bit like Roy said, you've got the resources. Are you comfortable at the stage that your internal audit charter is sufficiently broad enough for you to do the work you want to do?
Yes.
Cracker. When was it last reviewed?
This committee reviewed it back in, I think, December or September?
We did that in December. Good.
September last year, I think.
Thank you.
The last meeting. Of the year.
Because I think it's just important that we keep it up to date, that it does give you the capacity, it does give you the scope to do what you need to do as a... Look, I also pick up Roy's point about 9%, and I had wondered whether 9% was enough, and was going to ask you, is that enough? Not necessarily because do you have the resources, but actually do you need to have the free float given the nature of the issues that arise? Look, I just invite you to keep an open mind as to whether in some way there is a need to reprioritise so that you can increase that free float because of the issues present themselves during the course of the year. Look, I'd invite you and actually keep the committee informed of that, because I think you'll find us sympathetic, because I take your point, Roy, that it's undoubted that something will arise, and the good work of internal audit was probably needed for that. So I could handle a change, is what I'm trying to say.
And it's usually important when it does arise.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it's actually real-time assurance is what you're talking about, Roy, which makes a lot of sense. Having said that, I'd be sympathetic and I'd approve, and then we had a debate about approve. Can I just ask, this comes to us with the full recommendation of ELT as well. They've had a chance to look at this. This makes sense to them in terms of the plans that they would like for your team, Phyllis?
Yep, Stephen.
Perhaps I can answer that, Chair. Yes, this did come before ELT, and there are a number of changes made as a result of that feedback, but ELT backs it and supports it.
Great, that's good. So we've got, assuming it gets through this committee, we've got strong alignment between governance and management about the good work that you actually do. Can I say, just a great plan. Cool. I loved particularly your distinction between internal audit assurance advisory and business integrity, and it's great that we've got the business integrity up with 100%. That's really superb. You've got the indicative audits for 23, 24. I just want to make certain that's the right date. You're giving us a sense of what you're going to do 2 years out as well, correct?
Yeah. It's indicative of other areas that came up during our audit planning. What could happen is some of this might be reprioritized, like if
yes.
And that can come into the current year, in which case we'll come back to this committee for a change. So I do appreciate the offer that we could come back to update our plan to respond to some of the recent requests.
Yeah, look, absolutely. No, I made some assumption that was what I was looking at here, that this, you've said really it's those not rejected but can't be done in the 22-23 year. And it's good to keep that as a record of what we've got going forward, which is fine. What I'd like, Roy, if you need, I'm on page 27 of our agenda, by the way. But are you actually missing that, eh?
Yeah, I've got some.
Oh, right, okay.
I wasn't sure what I was.
Okay. Well, look, I certainly hope that we can get you the complete copy.
It's just ripping some pages out of his
So
now.
Bruce,
could I ask one more question while we're doing that?
Yeah, go for it.
I guess, looking at the actual timeline when we're looking at which quarters things are scheduled for, if you were looking at having to reprioritise to create more room for responsive reviews, I'm guessing that the marinas one is the one that would drop because it's in quarter 4. It's the more likely one to be pushed out into the future years. And I guess it'd be a good question about, are you comfortable that that's the one that's kind of the least, that's the lowest priority, would most likely be bumped? Is this committee comfortable that the marinas one is the lowest priority and would most likely be the one that would be affected if we had to look at that? I'm just on page 30 of my papers, or page 6 of 11 of the work plan.
Sorry, I must confess. Are you saying, would we agree that would be the one that would be bumped?
Well, I'm just saying that I guess my first question is my assumption correct that if you had to reprioritise, probably the one that's in the fourth quarter would be most likely to slip? And if that assumption is correct, then I think we should have a conversation as a committee about whether we're comfortable that that's the one that is most likely to move.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if I could answer that first part of that question. The bit, we won't necessarily drop marinas, because internal audit is only about 50% of our work. So what we might do is to rescope some of our assurance advisory or integrity pieces of work. That's kind of what we have traditionally done to kind of reduce advisory in those space, or to defer some of the internal process improvement works that we might have planned for ourselves. We nip a bit across the plan, to be honest, rather than to totally drop an audit. But if we find that we can't deliver some of these audits, and that has happened before, we come back to this committee to suggest which audits we might actually drop off or defer rather to the next financial year.
Yeah. I guess my initial reaction to that is I don't like the idea of cutting back on process improvement and those sorts of things, because I think that's really, really important work, that it can improve efficiency across the organisation and kind of ties into, a lot of the goals I think that ELT have about cost savings across the organisation. So I would probably be more comfortable saying actually marinas is kind of something that it would be good to do if we can, but if it's not urgent, if there's not a burning issue there, it's just a matter of we think this needs a look at some point, then that to me seems like a more natural thing to push off, rather than saying, oh, actually we're going to go and look at all the other really great business integrity work and processes improvement that we do. That would be my take, but I don't know where the rest of the committee might sit on that.
I wondered, Jenny, if we're jumping a hurdle we don't need to jump at the moment. I mean, I think what I'm trying to reflect from my comments is I'm very keen to see that we follow through on this assurance plan, and I just love that word assurance, because this is what it's not internal audits, it's actually an assurance plan, which is good. I would leave it with Phyllis to come back to us when the challenge arises that actually there needs to be some reprioritisation, and I suspect who knows what it could be if it has to happen, and probably what needs to be bumped would be clear then, rather than trying to assess that now. My final question, Phyllis, you can see good papers create good questions, so well done. Can I just, in looking at the detail of the assurance plan, there's the Mataho Aranui, I hope I say that right, that's the Maori Partnership and Maori Strategy strand. Is something that I think has work proposed for 22-23. Could you just expand on what you're going to do there for me, please? Because I think it's an important area.
Sorry, what page are you on?
I'm on page 35 of the agenda. It's page 11 of your paper.
Okay. So Mata'aho Aranui is a new business, new business unit that's been set up separately. I mean, the function has always been there, so we are recognizing it as a standalone business unit. We haven't actually done previous work directly within this function yet. What we have done is look at how what we are proposing that we do is to look at how we consider our integrity obligations within all the audit work that we're doing. So not just separately, but we are also proposing some work that we might bring into this year as unplanned scheduled work. The reason why we haven't confirmed yet is because we are still in discussions about where we could best add value to their work program. And yes, this is one of the areas which I anticipate that we might actually have a responsive piece of work, depending on ongoing discussions about how we best support them and the work that they have.
Good. Look, and I just want to encourage that. I mean, I've obviously highlighted in the discussion this afternoon, Phyllis, but I'd like to encourage you to be really open-minded as to how our assurance program can help further that strategy. I think it's really important. I said elsewhere as we were using insurance to advance those sorts of strategies and thinking, and I'd be very keen that we do that here as well.
Yeah, the team has been very responsive and open to the discussion, Karepa and his leadership team, so the conversations are definitely open and ongoing.
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
Good. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, that's fine. And actually, Laurie, I think you've been there for a while. Welcome, Laurie, to our meeting. Great to see you here. Can we move to the resolutions? I sense we've probably had a fair thrash at this. And the resolution's reasonably simple, which is, and we've agreed now, we're going to approve the Assurance and Business Integrity Work Plan for 22-23. And we will still receive the information on the elected members' gifts and hospitality register, noting that we have actually got good compliance now. Well done, Phyllis. Is everybody prepared to move that motion for me? Thank you, Liz. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Jenny. Is there any discussion on the motion? Otherwise, please take your remote and vote accordingly, please. Actually, I never quite, we haven't declared whether the motion's been passed or not, but I'm making an assumption that we're all A-OK here, Emily, and if you see anything of big risk, tell me all of a sudden, please. Why don't we move, please, to the health, item 2.3, which is the health and safety. Wendy, I think you're going to lead us through this, please. Just as the folk come up, can I just express my gratitude to those around the table that attended? Well, firstly, my gratitude to the health and safety team for the workshop that we had a couple of weeks ago, a month ago, probably can't remember now, whenever we had it. Within the last month, it was tremendous with Emma. It really was insightful. And I'm very grateful that you did it. It really helped front up the idea for us around our due diligence obligations in a pretty open way. We found a few things out, didn't we, about ourselves, which hopefully we can move and improve on. So on behalf of the committee, thank you to the health and safety team for that work. That's been really good, and I'm very keen to encourage it as we carry on. So I can invite you guys to address your paper, please.
Thank you, Chair, and kia ora, thank you for having us. I did want to highlight a couple of things from the paper, but firstly, before I do, it's a good opportunity to actually introduce a couple of new faces in the Health, Safety and Security Leadership Team. Yeah. As you know, the structure of health, safety and security has been changing to better resource the work needed for the Council's maturity improvement journey. I'm pleased to say we now have a fully resourced leadership team that will help support me going forward and sort of start us on that journey. So I would like to introduce TJ Fowler and Johnny Barker, that they both have started with us.
You're welcome.
Just to give a little bit of background, TJ Fowler joins us as the Principal Advisor, Health and Safety Services. The role is new for Council and will be responsible for a range of council-wide health and safety activities. And creating this role was one of the recommendations set out in last year's external audit to retain a centralised corporate health and safety resource. And it also gives a broad strategic focus to further develop and manage the Council's health and safety system. TJ is 4 weeks into the role and is already diving headfirst into various pieces of work, most notably the project to replace our existing health and safety management risk manager solution. So it's great to have TJ on board. Johnny Barker joins us as the team leader, Health and Safety and Security Business Partners. So Johnny will lead the new business partner team and help build a high-performing set of advisors who work in partnership with the organisation's various business units. And this will help increase their health and safety and security maturity and capability. Johnny is a seasoned health and safety and security professional with local and international experience in some extremely complex operational environments. So he recently moved to Wellington from the Waikato, where he had previously been working with Tātua Dairy Company Limited. So it's great for me to have this additional support on board and, continue the journey that we've started.
Brilliant. Welcome, you guys. It's great to have you on board. Look forward to the input you guys can have to our health and safety initiatives. So well done. Thanks, Wendy.
So yeah, look, just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight from the paper. Just following on from the health and safety management solution, we're almost at a point in the process of selecting a new supplier to replace our existing health and safety management solution risk manager. We know through staff feedback and the external audit last year that a review and potential replacement of risk manager was much needed. This involved going to the market to see what was available, and after receiving and reviewing a range of submissions, we have had presentations from 4 shortlisted providers. With a decision on which supplier expected in May, we're on track to have a new tool in place by October later this year. This is a fundamental piece of work set out in the 2021 audit recommendations, which will enable a range of other activities to happen at the Council so we can shift the maturity needle over the next 3 years. Just in relation to COVID-19, the Council Committee continues to work through various COVID-19 implications. While the numbers look good, there's still a consistent amount of work being done and put into ensuring our controls, our risk assessments and other workplace guidance is appropriate for the changing environment. As more people have begun returning to the office, and we did do a quick calculation, so 56.65% on Monday the 2nd of May compared to 20% on Monday the 31st of Jan. It's pertinent that we are taking a balanced health and safety and pragmatic approach to how we use the corporate environment, ensuring that a balance between safe and practical use of the space. For example, we've recently reassessed the risk assessments of lifts in corporate spaces, increased occupancy limits to 4 per lift, with continued use of masks and distancing as some of our preventative controls. A COVID-19 management group involving HR, health and safety, property and communications has been established to better monitor COVID-19 at Council as it becomes we become less reactive and more business as usual activity. There is still no indication of significant workplace transmission, which indicates the effectiveness of our controls that we have in place at the moment. Other than that, we are assuming that the paper has been read and happy to answer any questions.
Well, I'm still grateful for your lead, even though you can assume it's been read, Wendy. So thank you, thank you for that, and I appreciate that. That's really superb. Members, or Meredith, anything you want to add before I open it up? No, you're fine. Members, anything you'd like to raise with Wendy or Meredith? Or indeed, down the back, TJ and Thomas, and Johnny as well. There, yes. Well, thank you. It's Iona. Oh, well, we've got a screen here. Iona, welcome.
Sorry, Bruce. Honestly, I'm just having to flick between this screen and then my diligent notes. The contact centre reach, I just didn't quite understand that about giving out a name of a staff member.
Whereabouts are you? Sorry, Iona.
I think that was on page 52. Hang on, I'll just, if I understood that correctly.
Oh, so this is amongst the incidents, right?
Yeah, the incidents. So it was, let me just, that a parking resolution staff member was given out. Contact centre had released the full name and email address. So I guess I was just concerned. It just seems like a funny thing for it to have been done. That's maybe a question for Meredith.
The question being why this happened?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sorry. I guess I'm just, when I look at so it's an investigation, but can I just have some reassurances, I guess, that this isn't a standard thing to happen?
No, I don't believe it is a standard thing. It may have been a training opportunity with some turnover in the call centre. I'm not sure about that. We can come back to you on it, and continue to work with the call centre team on not releasing full details of staff, particularly in such highly sensitive roles such as parking, where they do already receive significant abuse.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I was concerned, because we know that's where a lot of the problems happen. So I just want to signal my concern that needs to be treated really seriously. The EAP trend is going down. Is there any reason for that?
Just is there a reason for why EAP is trending down?
So is it that people don't feel it's necessary? I thought there's been a lot of stress recently, so I was just surprised. Or is it just that they're getting help somewhere else?
Yeah, look, I actually think that that's an indication of our business partner model also working, where we're providing a lot more support, and our response times are a lot quicker with the team, being able to put in a lot more time and effort with business units. There has been a lot of people in a bit of a, with the flexibility about working from home and things like that, we haven't had a lot of people in the office as well. So, we've noticed that trend as well. And we're actually looking at that as being positive, because our being well at Council Hub is being well utilised, and there's a lot of good information in there being shared. So a lot of resources and tools, and our business partner model is starting to kick in.
Okay, Wendy, I don't want to, I'm just a bit sceptical, just given how much stress there has been going on. But if you feel confident that that's the case, then that's a positive thing. But yeah, let's just keep an eye on that.
Just through the chair, we can go back to the provider. Obviously, there's a great deal of confidentiality in regards to what we get told from the provider.
Of course.
But whether or not they're seeing that with other organisations, always ebbs and flows depending on times of the year as well. We may see that it kicks up again right before Christmas, as it often does. Just there's extraneous stresses that people feel heading into a difficult financial period. But so we can ask for some analysis more from a trend basis from what the provider's saying versus I don't believe there's anything inherently going on in regards to why our staff aren't using it in the same aspect, but only because we do see the ebbs and flows for whatever reason.
Okay.
Sorry, Jenny, you had a point?
Yeah, I just had a question about EAP as well, so I was just going to jump in and then hand it back to you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you. Just one of the things that I noticed in the reporting is that on page 43 of our papers, it looked like the hours being used were going up. They're significantly higher than they were in the period last year. So it's 239 hours of EAP assistance being provided, but the number of active users is falling. So I would love to have a little bit of that kind of unpicked, because that's interesting as well to me, that maybe we've got fewer users, but they're using it really well. They're getting a lot of time and value out of it. So it would be great to kind of understand how those things interact as well.
Yep, happy to provide that.
Okay, that's a helpful question. Thanks, Jenny. And just my last question. I appreciate this is a slightly national political football, but obviously the protests had a significant impact on staff. So, I mean, is there a place for us to do a thorough review if the government won't do it, just from our end?
A review on the impact of their wellbeing based from the protest?
Yeah, and what we do if there's more similar problems in the future. So in other words, what have we learned? What can we do differently?
Yes, I'm not 100% sure of what the debrief has been for those most closely involved, but we can go back and have a look and come back to you on that. I know that significant support was provided throughout, particularly for those that did have to enter into the area, such as parking. And there were a number of health and safety mitigations put in place to ensure that only those that felt that they could or were able to enter it, did do that. We didn't force staff to do that. I think from a Wellington perspective, it's taken an impact on all Wellingtonians, but obviously those who were frontline, such as police and some of our staff who did have to deal with that, it would have taken a toll.
Yeah, so I guess, look, I see this as actually being really critical, and as I said, obviously we've been waiting to see what the government will do because it's their role. But nevertheless, if they're not going to do it, I think this is essential that we we do look at what can happen next time, because I don't think we were all impacted right as much. So I think that would be important, Meredith.
There has actually been an internal debrief that a number of us were involved in. So as part of the protest response team, a follow-up meeting was held last week in terms of an internal debrief. So that has happened, and with some lessons learned or some positive things that we did, and also the involvement of our staff across the organisation.
So I think, Wendy, it would be helpful to maybe see that in a future report to this committee, or wherever you consider it appropriate, maybe to finance and performance.
Thank you, Anna. Wendy, you can take that on advice. It would be useful. I mean, it's a point that you've highlighted in the course of your actual report, that we've all been, the council has been affected by the event. It's logical that if you've got a debrief, to bring back what seem to be the health and safety implications for us as an organisation.
No problems.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Iona. Any other questions? Oh, Laurie, you've got your hand up, I think. Oh, sorry, Jenny. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Bruce. Page 46, just incidents by hazard source. Just that personal confrontation, and it might be in there, so forgive if I haven't, but is that better or worse than what we've seen in the last period? Because it looks worse to me.
We have been seeing a increase in personal confrontation, and there have been a lot more incidents of personal confrontation logged in terms of risk manager, and the team have been working closely with some business units that are definitely more affected than others, and we are definitely aware of some more specific incidents related to those working in various parts of the organisation. And our business partners are starting to work in conjunction with those business units to deliver some tailored training and support for the team, just as we are seeing that increase.
Thank you, Wendy. And one more question, he pātai anō, Bruce. The near, on, or in water, could you give me just a bit of a few examples of what those hazards might look like in our council context?
You're welcome to come up if you need to help support your colleagues. JT, you're welcome to.
From the back of the room, Councillor Pools.
Pools.
Swimming pools.
Swimming pools. Okay. Yep, that's logical. I was thinking about Muswellai Harbour, but you're right. We've got swimming pools as well. We've a good number, haven't we? Thank you for that, Laurie. Yes, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just following up on Councillor Foon's question about the personal confrontation, I guess I would quite like, if it's possible in the next report, to maybe see a personal confrontation broken out a little bit more, so that we could see, and I would be really keen to kind of see the trend over the past 2 years, because I know that it has been going up, but because we only see the report, we see quarter by quarter, it's kind of hard to wrap my head around like how much it's gone up. And while I'm conscious that obviously reporting about the past doesn't help us actually fix it, I just think for context, it would be really helpful in the next report if we could see that, because we know it's our #1 critical risk. It would be really great to kind of break it out. We know it's going up.
Yeah, look, and that's the great thing about having TJ Fowler on board in terms of the team. We can now, spend a bit more time in that space looking at our reporting. I know I spoke quite early on in a previous paper just around our reporting and wanting to, wrap the story around what is it actually telling us. And, TJ is going to be great for doing that in the future. So that is definitely an improvement that we want to make on the report itself. And, we're happy to go and spend some time breaking that down even further.
Thank you, that'll be awesome. And then I also just wanted to follow up on, again, still on personal confrontation, but just wanting to kind of just, I guess, turn the angle a little bit and talk about personal confrontation to do with engagement and consultation staff, because I think we frequently talk about and think about personal confrontation in terms of our parking wardens, obviously, and the increasing amount of personal confrontation that we're seeing at our public-facing sites like libraries, pools, those sorts of things. But I've been reflecting on, and I know that we've had at least one incident recently that councillors were part of where engagement staff were on site in the public and were dealing with some quite abusive behaviour. And I guess that's something that I would like to have a better understanding of and better assurance of how we keep those people safe and how we make sure that they get wraparound support, because often sometimes they're in the comms unit and they therefore have kind of that wraparound support, but sometimes they're just, one of our staff members going out to talk to the public about a new policy that's coming up.
Yeah, and that's the journey that we're on, and we want to, when we talk about the business partner model, in that particular instance that you're talking about, we, as soon as we were made aware of it, we've partnered with that team to understand kind of where they're at, where are some of their training gaps and support that's required, and have been working really closely with them. So an outcome to that is that there's a team training around that and some support that's wrapped around them, and that to me is seeing the business partner model working, and that's what we want to see in terms of going forward. So, as long as we know about those sorts of things, we want to make sure that we front foot them rather than, following up after incidents have actually happened.
And I guess then my follow-up question to that is about how making sure that you do know about them, and are we getting the word out to staff to make sure that they are reporting those kinds of things, because it can become, as you well know, it can become quite normalised. And I know I've spoken to staff members in the past and said, oh, that was a pretty rubbish situation you were in, and they'll say to me, oh, no, it's fine. Now, that may just be I'm a counsellor, and they don't want to make a big fuss in that context. But I don't want people's responses to be, it's fine. I want their response to be, yeah, that was rubbish, and I've reached out to the health and safety team, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and it's being, we're actually taking it through a process. What can we do more? What can we do to help make that part of our culture?
Yeah, part of that is that we don't have tolerance for that sort of stuff, and we want people to report it. So the more that they, it does happen, and hopefully it doesn't, but that it is logged into risk managers so that we can wrap that support around them as quickly as possible. But ultimately, as I said before, we want to front foot a lot of that stuff. So early education and support that we can provide as business partners is going to be really pertinent in these, situations, especially as personal confrontation has been one of our, biggest risks and hazards for quite some time now, as you've pointed out, and we need to get on top of that.
Just further to that, Councillor, you'll recall the video that we released last year. For this very reason, it's about raising awareness with the public as well around our expectation of how they interface with our staff. And while we're not unique in that this is unfortunately a rising scenario for almost every front-facing organisation, we will continue to share that story that we will not tolerate that abuse. So we've seen improvement in, for example, social media about our team very aptly no longer accepting some of the derogatory or abusive comments and following very strict processes to that. So we did do a deep dive into this as a Nasty 9 last year with a range of teams who have different interactions and experience this risk is significantly within the unit. And at that time, I don't believe that the engagement team had that level. So this is, I guess, a sign of the times, and then making sure that as this continues, we capture them, take them on the journey, and make sure that we have a consistent approach across the council about what we will not accept from the public.
And not expecting you to be able to answer this now, but it would be great to kind of know going forward. I guess I have reassurance that I'm confident, for example, that a parking warden knows when to walk away. What I worry about is in a public engagement context, whether our staff members, because we have a legal obligation to consult, right? Whether our staff members feel like they can't walk away, or how confident are we that staff who are taking part in that kind of public consultation are confident about where their boundaries are, and when they have a right to actually say, no, this has crossed my line. So you may not be able to answer that right now, but these are the kind of the things that I'm starting to think about. It would be great to be able to continue that conversation next time.
I can probably add something to that, Councillor Condi. So on the transitional bike network, we have a board meeting once a month, and we're constantly reiterating that to especially some of our younger project managers who are going out and engaging with the public, that actually when it does get, and we're also making sure senior staff go out with them as well. So we never do the engagement solo either. So we're quite aware of that. Having been on the receiving end of heated public engagement, yeah, we're acutely aware.
Thank you for that, Jenny. Liz.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following on from the conversation right now, and thank you for your paper and also the measures that you're putting in place to ensure that our team are safe. I just wondered, is there scope to include that for elected members as well? Because given that we're going into an election period, I know from past experience for myself that it can get quite heated when you are engaging with the public, and is there scope to include that? Because we know that there is a lot of anxiety and stress out there in the community right now, and I actually think it's going to get worse before it gets better. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening with our economy, people's jobs, are they coming back to work, health. There's you can feel the anxiety in the air, and I think, you know, to hear from, well, Countdown is the one that's been really quite public about the abuse that the shopkeepers are, I don't know, what do you call them? You know, the checkout operators, the abuse that they're getting, and I'm just thinking, why would you abuse a checkout operator? But I think that it's going to get worse, so I'm just saying, is there scope to include the elected members?
That's a very good observation and question. And as we enter into the election period, we will partner with Democracy Services about what we can do, particularly where there's public debate, and looking at potentially providing security if that's not been done in the past. I think it has been in some occasions, but we can be much more deliberate, noting the current context in which you will be electioneering.
Yeah, I don't know why, but the community, they just think that because you're there representing them, they own you, they own your time, they can say whatever they like about you, regardless of who you are or what you feel. So I get it that they do that with our officers and our kaimahi that are out there in the community, but I think maybe just if you can widen it a little bit more.
And what we can also do is provide guidance for you all to be aware of as well about not putting yourselves in dangerous situations, and the security team would be more than happy to do that and work with the Mayor's Office and Democracy Services on making sure that you do feel safe in the situations that you go into.
Right, I'm keen that we do draw this to a close. I think we've got one more question from Iona, then I'd like to bring things to a conclusion, please. Iona.
Thanks. Just really quickly, look, I think it's been a really useful discussion, and Meredith, I'd just encourage you maybe to think about how councillors can, and any decision maker in the city can contribute to a more positive culture as well, because there's been some pretty ropey stuff said around the traps as well, and I think, yeah, it's about just trying to be quite restrained in public discourse. Thanks.
Thank you, Iona, and thank you both to you, Wendy and Meredith, and your team behind you for, again, a very good report, and one that's in general discussion. In fact, probably more questions could go if we kept it longer, but I am conscious of time. So unless there's any burning question, Roy or Linda, or myself, I guess I'm talking to, I think we'd like to try and draw this to a conclusion. You guys okay? Sweet. So we go to the resolution, please, which is that we receive the information and we recommended the Peroro Tahua Finance and Performance Committee to receive the information. And that's a wee bit of a coded resolution, isn't it, Meredith, that actually we're still trying to explore, and you and I got a discussion along with Diane, just quite what is the way to be efficient in our reporting. But my presumption is in moving the second part of this, they will get to see the full suite of papers so that you're not subject to double jeopardy of some different form of reporting. So that would be useful. probably would even be useful, dare I say, that they actually see the minutes of the actual discussion we have as well, because that actually would be helpful and informative for them too. So look, is anybody prepared to move those motions, please? Thank you, Jenny. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Linda. Is there any discussion on the motions? There being none, I'll put it, please, and can you please use your remote? Oh, did mine not go? There we go, we'll try that time. Sweet. Can we move, please, to item, we're okay there, Emily? I can keep going. I'm having any democratic problems going on in my life here at the moment. Can I move to the draft annual report? A very bulky paper, Lloyd, but a very necessary one. So welcome.
Karen's going to join us online.
Oh, okay. And we have Karen somewhere behind us, somewhere? Online.
Hi, Bruce.
Oh, g'day, Karen. How are you? Good to have you here as well too. Thank you very much. I might just need to introduce your team for my benefit, please, if that's okay. That would be really great.
I'll do that as well. I think we have a presentation to come online as well, and that'll be coming up shortly. With me, I have Rainer from the finance team, and Rainer is taking over the role of Richard Marshall. Some of you may remember Richard Marshall used to have, and Bronwyn from the corporate planning and reporting team with me as well. This makes up the awesome team.
Can I just introduce Rainer properly? Rainer's our new financial controller. It's a new role with a lot of focus on financial control. So welcome, financial controller.
Well done. Welcome.
So that's the awesome team you have in front of you.
Yeah. You've got to build up your team here, Lloyd. You can't just say they're here. Thank you.
We just have a wee presentation just to step you through some of the key parts. And I'm happy to take questions or invite Rainer or Bronwyn to chip in as we go through as well.
Yes.
So I'm assuming people online can see that presentation at this stage. Let's just hop into it. In terms of what we wanted to cover today was a bit of an overview of the timeline itself, and then how we're going to go about doing the annual report for this year. Just reflecting as well, remembering it takes a slightly longer journey this year because of elections, and you'll see that in the timeline as we go through. We go to the next page, please. And that is the timeline. You'll see that the end point is around December 15, I think it is there, yes, where the adoption is. And working back from there, you'll see quite a number of touch points which sit in there, both for this committee and also involving the Finance and Performance Committee as well. And one of the things in that whole process that I'd encourage all councillors to do is to be part of that process and to engage in the annual report and its development. I think that's really important because this document is the one document which tells the story of the city for the year. As time has gone by, we have noticed that more and more people use this document not only as a reference point, but as a research point and so on. So next slide. In terms of the structure and content of the report, we'll be following pretty much the same structure as we did for the previous one or the current one, if you like to think about it like that. We've been on a journey of trying to simplify and think of our audience and simplify and make sure that it's concise, that it's very readable, and people can understand both the financial and non-financial performance of the organisation and how that fits together. Obviously, it'll be aligned with our strategic framework in terms of the LTP, which is currently in place, and we'll continue to publish in 2 volumes. This is partly to make it more digestible, and that's a trend we've seen for a lot of organisations which are doing now. So we'll continue with that, and we've got some quite good anecdotal feedback on the current report around that. And then finally, one of the things that we do focus closely on is the standards of the Australasial reporting awards. That's an opportunity for us to really benchmark ourselves against others, and it also gives us a chance to look at where we can improve, get ideas from how others are telling their story, and both visually and in terms of from a narrative perspective. So we quite regard that quite jealously, actually, and we do get a lot of feedback from the adjudicators, of which I've got one sitting right next to me. Next slide, please. The structure, as I said, follows pretty much what we have had in the last annual report itself there, and up there I've detailed the various sections. The financial section in Volume 2 tends to be a self-contained volume, although the Volume 1 does pick up some of the elements of the financials in terms of giving an overall summary to people who are reading the report. What we try and do is make sure that people who pick up the report itself can get a pretty good idea of what's in it from reading the first section. That's always a challenge in a complex organisation where we have a lot of services, and it's something that we continually focus on as well. And the summary annual report too becomes quite important, and that's something that people can pick up, and if they choose to only read that, they should be able to get a similar picture and a similar understanding of where the organisation has come from in the past year, how it's performed, and what looking down the track might look like. Next slide, please. In terms of how we go about our outcomes and performance measures, again, we're continuing on the approach that we have established now. In terms of outcomes, we focus there on longer term trends. And we have now currently 2018 stats data available to us, although I know Bronwyn wants to interrogate that further. And the reason for that is we all are aware of some of the issues that Stats New Zealand has had in census data, so we want to have our own assurance process around that to make sure that we're comfortable that how we're representing those key outcome trends which tell us something about the state of the city and the direction of travel of the city, we're confident around the data and how we're presenting those trends. In terms of our approach to reporting performance, always an honest accounting. The annual report is not a CV for the organisation. It's an honest accounting of performance, so it is about the good, the bad and the ugly. But in doing that, we want to be as balanced as we can in that whole exercise. Use of case studies, will continue to do that and expand that, and that's a good way in which we can engage and feed in our services to the annual report, as well as profiling some of our people, because at the end of the day it's the people who are the glue in the organisation and make it work. So that's a really important part of that, and we'll do that both visually as well as using by narrative. We'll highlight and explain significant variances. What is it which has gone well and what hasn't gone well? And we've obviously got a threshold which we sit in there, a loose threshold which we use to distinguish between what is a significant variance and what is not, and we're quite transparent about around that. And that's something I guess this committee will be focusing on as we bring through the material for the report itself. And this year is also the first year of our new KPI framework, which we put in place in the 2021 LTP. So that will be in itself, I think, an interesting read as we go through. Bronwyn, do you want any comments about that? Okay. Next slide, please. In terms of the audit focus, we get signalled by the auditors where they'd like to look at for the coming year, and there are 3 areas which they've signalled to us in terms of some of the KPI material matters they want to look at there, and I won't go through them all individually, but you can see which ones they are. And I think that's reflecting the qualification that we had in relation to Three Waters. We also had an emphasis of matter around the Three Waters reform program. So that is obviously going to be an ongoing focus for the auditors, those KPIs, and particularly the outcome of of the Wellington water audit will be a key input into that whole process as well. And we've looked at how we time that and how we actually bring that into our annual report. If you go to the next slide, please. In terms of the non-financial material matters, they've also indicated some areas where they'd like to test out as well, and they'll do this with the officers concerned in the organisation, and all of those will signal in advance to the officers so they're prepared to work with the auditors on this and provide them with sort of information and detail that they need around that. I think it's fair to say none of those came as a surprise to us in terms of where they wanted to go, and I think Karen had signalled that in advance to us. Next slide, please. In terms of the look and feel, it will continue the theme, trying to make it as visual as possible. We like the A3 approach, which we introduced late last year, and that we think is worthwhile continuing with, because we do know one of the key trends for annual reports is to make them more consumable online. And of course, with a landscape orientation, that leads you down that path somewhat. So we'll continue with that approach, but also try and continue to emphasise the visual elements as much as we can to enhance that story, break up what can be a complex narrative at times, and so on. So you'll see that continue forward, and there are some ideas being bandied around the team at the moment on how we can make that even better than what we did last time. Next slide. I'll stop there. Any questions that people might have, I would be pleased to field them.
Yeah, look, I just wonder, let's just break that down, because you've done a good piece around the annual report, but you started with a timetable. So I would like to perhaps just firstly, Lloyd, look at the timetable. We've got an expanded version actually in our papers, and it's probably also timely for me to invite Karen, our auditor, to just comment on the timetable as well. So firstly, in introducing Karen, I just want to appreciate her work with us to get the audit plan through. And I think, if I recall correctly, there's an email from me saying that we had it and we were working with it, and it was one that was getting us on the roll. So, Karen, is there anything you'd like to just add to Lloyd's comments around, particularly the timetable, and then we'll look at the presentation and probably some of the other stuff in more detail.
Thank you, Bruce. Regarding the timetable, I guess I'm happy to answer any questions around the timetable.
Right. Well, thank you there, Karen. That's good. I got that.
Okay.
I've had my chance to ask about the timetable. I just want to draw three things out. Is your point was well made, Lloyd. There's a number of touch points. I'm a consultant. I should bring it into my terminology. There are a number of touch points that we have with the annual report from this point on, and I just want to note those. 30 August is obviously a key date for us. I know there's a lot of work that you guys do before the 30th of August, but it's an important date for us in terms of our chance to do that look at the near final draft of what you've actually got together and having comment, which is superb. 14 September is actually the risk committee meeting prior to the elections, where we've got some quite significant work to do, given the 15 December sign-off and really support for then the Finance Committee meeting on the 29th of September, so that they can pass, hopefully, some helpful resolutions on to the new and incoming council. So they are critical dates, let alone the fact that we've got some other dates sitting in there, which really are very relevant to how you guys move it along, Lloyd, and also how, working with Audit New Zealand, we reach a safe landing point. So, members, are there any questions you'd like to raise at this stage about the reasonably well-signalled timetable we've got at the moment? There isn't? Sorry, Roy.
I think one of the issues I see is, of course, that the elections are stuck right in the middle of it. In fact, this committee will take it up to a certain stage, and then the committee stops, and it's got to be picked up by a new committee, and of course the same with council. A new council is going to look at what is done with the old council, the old committee. It's always been a problem, but it's exacerbated this year in that the audit also only starts on the 3rd of October, by which time
it's virtually elections.
Stop.
Yes.
Are you comfortable in? Oh, Karen's disappeared.
I'm still here.
Okay. Is everybody who's involved happy with that, or
Perhaps if I can make some comments. Essentially, we're not dealing with an ideal process, and that's kind of pretty obvious. But what we've done is agree with Audit New Zealand a timeline and a process that will work for both Audit New Zealand and ourselves. The point about like this would be carried on by the new committee. Well, in fact, given the timing of the election and the timing of swearing in and establishment of the council, there won't actually be a Audit and Risk Committee convened in an appropriate time frame to allow this to happen. So that's why we are recommending with this timeline that it in fact gets dealt with by the new council itself, so that we're doing as much as we can prior to the election to give that assurance and recommending go forward with this subject to audit so that the new council can with confidence accept those recommendations subject to the audit, and therefore be as efficient and effective as we can in terms of getting the annual report signed off by the statutory date of the end of December. So we're not alone. In fact, I believe apart from Auckland and Christchurch, every other council's in a very similar position to us. So I think I'll leave Karen to explain why that's the case, but we have agreed this timeline and we have pointed out some risks with it, but we will do our best to keep on track with that, because at the end of the day, the council needs to sign it off before the end of December.
Karen, is there any comment you'd like to make to Roy's question?
You're on mute.
Look, I agree. This is not ideal. Statutory deadline been extended to the end of December due to the continuing impact of COVID. We agreed a timetable which works for both Wellington City and ourselves, and we'll be working very hard with the council to stick to the timetable, bring as much work forward as possible.
Thanks, Karen. Yes, Jenny.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. I guess my question is, as Bruce has said, we've got these two really key dates for us, which is the 14th of September Audit and Risk meeting and the 29th of September Finance and Performance meeting. What do you see as the key risks to audit and to you at your end being able to deliver on any work that needs to be done prior to those meetings? And how are you working with staff to mitigate any of that?
Thanks, Councillor. There are no risks based on this timetable. It is a timetable which I feel is doable. We've really thrashed this out with the council. So both the council and us agree that this is doable and practical. In terms of councillor around risk, there's some significant areas of focus for the audit this year, with Wellington being a large and complex council. And we intend to bring some of those risk areas and responses forward, do them early on.
Thank you. The other thing I just wanted to add to that, sorry, I've been distracted because I'm just trying to find the right information, Jenny. There is an interim and pre-final audit on the 27th to the 15th of July. If you go to Karen's paper, which is, and I'm looking at page 231 of our agenda, there is preliminary work. And actually for I think the work that we can transact as a committee and indeed pass on to the Performance Committee, it's going to be the results of that essentially systems work that is going to be important, that we have some form of memorandum reporting from Karen at that point, Jenny, so that we, and I've mentioned before things like letter of representation, where we can give a wee bit of assurance, I would hope, through that process to incoming council that we've looked that systems have been maintained and what have you. So there is some work that we can have, albeit the final audit doesn't start till after we've met for the last time for the triennium. So we'll take it as it comes. Yes, Bronwyn.
Through you, Chair. We are using the time that we would normally have the audit in that late August-September period to do a full peer review and internal checking. So we're not actually just waiting and handing the document forward. And as Karen indicated, we're bringing as much of our performance data early because the pre-final audit is actually in late June, July. So that is actually over the period where we will have some of that final data available. So it's a perfect storm for year end, but it does mean that you will get a much sharper product when you get it to review.
Thank you, Brian. That's really great. Right, if we could then move, please, to the other part of Lloyd's presentation, which is the nature of the report itself, the annual report. I've heard your points that you've made, Lloyd, about the quality, and you've just also mentioned the peer review, Bronwyn, that you're going to bring to the annual report. Now's, I think, a chance for us to have a short discussion about the sort of the pro forma that we've got inside our agenda pack. Are there comments members would like to make or questions asked about that pro forma at this stage? I have a couple of expectations, Lloyd, if I can put them from here, because it's actually great to be asked about the pro forma now. Actually, slightly being nostalgic because I'm getting old, Bronwyn, I actually have also been a reviewer of annual reports. And in fact, I don't know why, but, well, I do know why, because it was a very good annual report, but I've awarded, when it was the Institute of Chartered Accountants by itself, Wellington getting the top award in the old days. One of the things that actually was really done well, and it will be a minor test for me, Lloyd, is I think in the summary information, it's important that we not only report on the past, but there is some short series of statements about what are some of the prospective challenges we will have in the coming year. I think it's always important that if we are going to give a full report on our organisation, it's not only what have we got in terms of where we are at, but actually is that sufficient to meet the challenges going forward? And it would be reasonably normal for that to be there, so that would be really good. And I'm really grateful that you've raised the issue around this is the first year of the new regime, or the LTP regime, so I look forward to seeing what's there. And look, again, just to press upon you, and I've got no reasons to doubt that it isn't, but the meaningful nature of the response to actually what is the performance achieved or not achieved is really important. Hopefully we're past the days of the somewhat non-meaningful achieved or not achieved, because I can read that in the numbers. I want something that's a bit more if we are going to be transparent with our community. I know that that's something you'll have in hand, but I raise that as an expectation from the committee. Members, are there any other expectations or comments people would like to make?
Just a quick comment on what you said, and I couldn't agree more with what you've said. One of the things that, from a performance reporting perspective, that's been a focus for us and will continue to be a focus on is just not reporting the numbers, but the so what. What does this actually mean?
Yeah.
It's easy to put the numbers together in a fancy chart, quite frankly. It's the so what it means and how that's impacting the performance of the organisation, which is really the real oil, which is what I think people are interested in.
Yeah.
So that's been an explicit focus for us and will continue to do so going forward. And in the process of doing that, in the last LTP, when we were re-looking at our KPI framework, one of the things that we did have an eye on that process was having KPIs which would allow us to go down that path. And so while we're not there 100% yet, and we know that there are areas we could tweak, and that'll always be the case, that is a clear focus for us and always and will continue to be so.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that, Lloyd, and I'm glad that's the case. So look, I do have some more questions, and let me, I just want to ask it sort of like as a negative question, if you will, or some negative assurance. And that's not just that we've got a pro forma here, but we do also have a set of accounting policies. And I note your point, Bronwyn, I think that you want to do some checking around some of the assumptions that we use, particularly built around things like the census and what have you. Is there any matter of significance that you can see at the moment in terms of the way we recognise and measure our financial transactions that could affect these accounts?
That's something we're currently looking through at the moment, and we'll be working on some issues papers and things like that to get to Audit New Zealand before they come in for the interim audit.
Yep. Have you got any views about what those issue papers might be at this stage? It may be a bit unfair, but
it's mainly the issues raised in the audit plan.
Yes.
Around the revaluation of our infrastructure assets and our operational land and buildings.
Yeah, the fair value,
and management issues raised in the previous year's letter. Yep. So that's what we'll be focusing on.
So, I think if I picked up correctly in the papers, you plan to try and have the issues worked through, did I see by the 27th of June?
Yes, so we're preparing those papers in advance of Audit New Zealand coming in for the interim audit so that we can deal with those issues earlier on in the process rather than later on.
Brilliant.
So we're just hoping that Audit New Zealand is also able to look through those papers at the time they come in for the interim audit as well.
Good. Karen, is there any comment you could make on that, please?
We will be doing that, Chair and Raina. We certainly think that's a good approach to ensuring some of the significant matters are covered off.
Brilliant. That's music to my ears, Raina. Thank you for that. That's really helpful to know that that's taken care of. Because I do want to compliment Karen. She has given us a very fulsome list of issues. But I'd rather we had all the issues out on the table now and we had a chance, as you obviously are, to addressing those now rather than us finding mutually that we've got an issue later in the audit. So that's good planning. Roy, I think it looks like you're about to push the button, buddy.
Yeah. Just following what you say, the important areas where there's judgment, for example, weather type provision, that sort of thing. And I think this committee needs to be over those things quite quickly. So it's estimates and judgments, as well as the revaluation, which is just a huge number. But to me, at the end of the day, it's just a number because it doesn't affect anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
I don't know. We might have a debate here, Roy. So
well, it affects the depreciation, but it doesn't actually make any difference to the way you run the business. But the assumptions and the judgments are important, and we need to be across those early.
That'll be, by the way, a good check, Raina, for the 14th of September. So just thinking about that, picking up on my comments to Jenny about what we will have for the 14th, it will be good to know that those suite of issue papers, have been prepared. We've done our thinking about it and we've got them cleared through Karen and their technical team. That would be a really valuable thing because obviously we're all planning that more or less be the case by then.
I think they need to be earlier than that.
Oh, of course they do. Right. But what I'm trying to reflect here, Roy, is the importance for us as a committee on the 14th of September
absolutely.
To try and clear things. So that would be
2 weeks before that, there are
they will be brought through the workshops as well that we have with you.
On the 30th
and that will
August.
be a good opportunity for us to present those issues and where we're at with those.
That's great. No, thank you for that. Rightio. I'm surprised this hasn't generated so much more conversation. This is the most exciting paper we've got on you can't, isn't it, Stephen? I know that, Stephen. You're about to jump with joy over the annual report. No, we're not. Thank you guys for that. That's a very fulsome report. I'm glad we've had a chance, even in a short way, just to do it. I wonder if we could just look at the resolutions. They're quite fulsome that we received the information. And again, with my gratitude to your team, Lloyd, it's been tremendous. We note the approach and structure for the annual report, the key themes and the key messages. We have got a sense of where they're at. We note the plan for the year. We've discussed that at some length. And we approve the proposed format and disclosures that we've got there. I've asked a question about accounting policies, which comes back to GAP if anybody's interested in acronyms. Come on, Sarah, support me here. This is good stuff. And we determine, the determinating disclosure of the results. So we've talked about that. Well, it's been included in the conversation, and we know about the final clearance from Audit New Zealand. So that's all tickety-boo. And we approve the sign-off process and timetable ultimately for the 21-22 financial statements, which is superb. And I think even the timeline talks about we'll get the management report, which will be superb too. That's a mouthful, so I'm going to move from here that I will move from the chair that these recommendations. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Liz. Appreciate that. Remote, because I don't think there's any discussion on the motion, is there? Please use it. Off Daisy. Can I suggest at this stage, on an assumption that we've got an approved motion there, Emily?
Yes, we do.
Okay. The most important note that Emily's given me is that it's time for a cup of tea or a break. So can I suggest we have a 10-minute break, please? I would like to be back by 15:15. I am conscious that we still have some significant work to do, and I'd like to get through most of that before I lose Liz. Who's told me when she's going. here. G'day, Laurie. I see Laurie. And Liz is going to rejoin. And I think we have Iona as well. So I think we've got a good crowd going.
Not right now.
Okay. Look at you guys. You guys are in front of me. You know what's next on the agenda. So I'll let you, why don't you just tell us what you got? We're in your hands.
Kia ora tātou. Nice to see everyone in person again. I'll take the papers as read, but just a couple of points around. This is the first time that we've used the exception reporting format with the new strategic risk framework. So that's really just indicating that the dashboard provides the summary and a little bit of note on emerging risks or things that the executive leadership team have noticed, trends that are occurring around that it could affect the council. And then there's two significant changes to risk profiles. One, a totally new profile that was requested last time for inadequate asset management planning, and the significant updates to the COVID-19 profile. Other things to note are that the work plan has been put forward for the risk management team, and this year it's much more about embedding and implementing and working across the council with our peers. The last year has been quite a lot of rebuilding and developing new frameworks and testing those with peers and also with yourselves. So yeah, it's a little bit of a different focus this year, and trying to get much more uptake and maturity in risk management operational work across the council as well. That's probably it. I can just pass you over to questions now.
Thanks, Kim. That's really helpful. And again, great set. I think we've just, if I can give you feedback, and it might well be that I should really ask my members, I think we've struck a reasonable balance in terms of that exceptions reporting. Actually, it's quite good to remind yourself of the minutes, because I thought, oh, this is a bit skinny. Then I realised actually I'd been chairing the meeting that said, yeah, exception reporting. And that's good. I think we've got a reasonable balance at this stage, but members of the committee, I'm always open to suggestions if we can tweak it that makes it more useful. So Kim, can I suggest we deal with this in three ways? Firstly, I'd like to just have a discussion around the infrastructure asset management risk. It's brand new. Siobhan, I know you're hiding over there in the corner. You may want to come to the table, because I wonder whether you might have some comments you'd like to make about that. It's the new risk. Second, I'd then like to look at our total strategic risk framework, because the way in which you've come up with the good colours, it looks like this automatically is one of the heavy hitters for our risk framework. So then let's deal with the strategic risks. And then thirdly, let's just have a look quickly to cover off your risk plan for the year, which again, I'm very grateful for, Kim. So we can do it on that basis. Siobhan, I don't know if I could invite you, or Kim, perhaps you just want to tell us how you pulled this together, and if a couple of quick comments from you guys, and then I'll open it up to the floor, please.
Yes, I'll talk just generally about asset management and the risk of not doing it well. So good asset management planning really enables you to make effective trade-offs between risk, cost and service levels. So at the most basic level, if you think about you have assets, you might be replacing or renewing them just based on age, which is a fairly basic approach. If you fail to plan to do that, if you fail to, let's take roofs for instance, if you fail to plan to maintain it, so painting it at regular intervals, what you'll tend to do is have a failure in that roof, which is then very costly to repair, and the impact of that failure might be quite significant. So fundamentally what asset management planning is really just planning on how you're going to care for your assets and how you're going to maximise the life of them. And then you fold into it, how do you then plan for new assets on top of that, how you plan to retire assets. And it's just a very deliberate way of approaching managing your assets so they can deliver a service for whatever you need it for. So effectively, we only manage assets to be able to deliver a service to our community. And it's really important that we do that in a deliberate way. So failure to do this means that actually you're not aware of the risk you're running. We've got some really good examples of that here in Wellington, where you have significant asset failure, which results in a lot of disruption, a lot of unnecessary cost, and basically a loss of confidence when it comes to the asset manager. So without that awareness, you know, you're spending money, but you don't actually know what it's being spent on, whether it's an effective spend of money. And when you're in a fiscally constrained environment, it means you can't make those trade-offs. So if you want to do new stuff and you know you can't afford to do it, how do you know where you can peg back your investment and carry more risk? So it's a very deliberate management technique to enable you to make those trade-offs.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Do you want me to talk about? Do you want me to talk about where we're at currently and what our
yes, please.
it is?
Yeah, look, go for it, Siobhan. Yeah.
So probably about 15 months ago, we had an asset management maturity assessment done. We were rated on a 5-point scale, and we came out as basic, which was 2 out of 5 points. So basically, it's just we're more than aware. So we know we do produce asset management plans. We do have asset managers across the organisation, but we're very disconnected. We don't take a systematic approach to asset management, and we don't do it as deliberately as we could. So in response to that, I've just recruited an asset planning manager, and their role will be to set up a small team to really lift that capability across the organisation. So in time for the next long-term plan, we'll be able to eyeball these plans and we'll actually be able to assist with council with making those trade-offs where they need to.
Good. Thank you. So, members, Kim, I take it if I open up for members, that's fine, or is there anything you want to add about the risks as you pulled it together?
I guess I'll just a little bit of commentary on the risk assessment itself. Like all the other scenarios, we've used the maximum credible approach. So this is really saying if we don't take measures given our current state and where things could land if we don't get it right, what is the worst case outcome? That's still credible. So this doesn't necessarily mean it is the outcome we will have. And we are, as we're saying, taking measures right now to try and address some of the gaps and vulnerabilities that we see. So important to recognise that if we do have things up there in that red quadrant, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what's happening now. It's what could happen if we don't get our ducks all in a row or make concrete steps. And this is really about the planning as much as the asset management itself. It's that having that strategic lens and providing you and the council with good information for good decision making so you can understand when you are making those decisions about the life cycle and the budget constraints or the benefits. And that's really part of it, is having that strategic focus for councillors to make decisions about the assets as well. So that's a bit of a gap at the moment too.
Thank you, Kim. That's very helpful. Members, who you got? Yes, Linda.
Well, I was just interested in, are you looking for a software package that can be used across the organisation that standardises the approach?
Yeah, we will ultimately, but what we're really, so I have been involved in projects previously where they've been led by the IT solution, so we're really wanting to develop the frameworks for decision making first, so we have a consistent framework and then we'll look for potentially a package to assist with that. Yeah.
So how long do you think the time frame will be before it's up and running?
So I think for long-term plan we'll be able to look at, we'll have good plans for our property and our transport and the critical assets in that space, and then we'll be rolling it out further. So yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask Siobhan, do you agree with the risk ratings here? In this, have you? I don't know whether you've seen the Kim part, which is the colourful bit, which, like a magpie, I get attracted to. I just wonder whether you've had a chance to look at that.
Yeah, no, I have, and I think it's pretty accurate for where we're at now.
I'm interested in the residual risk, which I'm not quite certain, and probably you need to help me again here, Kim. We call it our target risk rating. That's not my target. If it is, we are in deep trouble. I'm serious. I'm a bit surprised at the gaps that we have as a council. When we look at those gaps in the analysis, we are indeed where that residual risk is, but that's not the target. Surely it isn't.
Well, I guess it's a little bit of a target and a little bit of what is realistically achievable and what time frame we're talking about as well.
Good point.
So this is about the planning, I suppose, not necessarily the
result.
The asset management itself. So in an ideal world, yes, or if we have a much more comprehensive work plan and greater opportunities for improvement, then that residual risk can go down. And that's the thing about this whole framework, is that annually we'll look at the ratings and say, are they realistic? How much work has been done? Are these still the right ratings based on our current understanding? So that's the opportunity to revisit not just the ratings for one threat, but all of them really, and say, is this still correct? And do we think we can do better, or can we do more?
That's actually very helpful. Thank you for that, Kim. Because you can see what I'm saying, and I guess I'm looking here at a slightly longer term view of where this risk should be, but it can't be in that quadrant up there, I would have thought, in this situation. So I wonder, Siobhan, if I could then just go to the gaps. I hear the point about a comprehensive council-wide asset management policy and strategy and approach. Makes a ton of sense, and I think I'm so old now, I've seen asset planners inside partnering and outside as a separate planning shop. I've seen them do the circle about 5 times, so I'd really encourage you to get that one nailed. I was interested on the second page, this is 246 of my agenda. One of the gaps is in some of the critical assets, such as parts of the Three Waters. This isn't a total asset management plan meeting, but I just wondered if there was any comment you could make on that. It's been one of the areas where all my engineering friends tell me, Bruce, our asset management planning is done, but we do have control of our critical assets. And that's comforting if we're looking at a long-term plan. How is that gap going to be fixed by the time we get to the coming long-term plan?
Probably not.
No.
Not in the water space. So in terms of critical infrastructure, critical property and critical transport infrastructure, I'm confident we'll have that nailed.
Yeah.
As we've highlighted before to council, Wellington Water now is really concentrating on delivering the core services it needs to up to reform. And I suspect that they won't be able to make significant progress on asset management in the meantime.
Okay. Well, here's the value of a risk conversation, isn't it, actually, in that sense? Jenny, I think you've got your hand up, please.
Thank you. I guess one of the things that we have done in the Three Water space is the very high criticality assets. Is that finished yet with Wellington Water?
Yes, so they've done the condition assessment, so now they're just working through the planning as to what that means in terms of asset renewal, asset upgrades, etc.
Yeah. That might be something that would be useful to note in here, just because Three Waters is such a significant concern, would be to say that work was funded and completed. And my understanding there is funding then for them to continue on to the high criticality assets, and that work is going to continue.
Yeah.
So accepting that they're in a transition mode and significant gains are not possible, that there is still some work happening.
Yeah, good point.
I'm smiling at the idea of high criticality.
Yeah, very high criticality, high criticality.
Yeah, that's critical, yeah. Okay, cool.
And I guess this kind of leads me to my question, which is, again, where should we be putting our effort? So you've talked about kind of where you think our critical assets are. There are some limitations in Three Waters because of the transition to reform that I guess it makes sense we would want to put our efforts perhaps into the entity C to make sure that their asset management is good, rather than putting our effort into an entity that's about to be wound up. But beyond that, where should we be putting our efforts with the asset classes that we have?
Yeah, I think it's really in our vertical build, horizontal build, and then also waste. So all of those are highly critical ones. And then you've got the likes of waterfront, parks, community centres will be included in vertical build. Your venues will be critical as well. So really, yeah, it's across the board. And I guess those secondary assets would be looking at those lower risk assets would be in the park space in terms of public land and parks and so forth.
Because I guess that's, agreeing that some of those things like community centres are probably lower criticality assets. But that's probably where a lot of my concern sits, given that, when I think about what we have to decide in the next long-term plan, it's really around a lot of the infrastructure that supports growth, which is going to include a lot of that park, sport and rec, community facility stuff. So I guess my question is, how far along the asset management journey do you think we can realistically get prior to the long-term plan on some of those assets where we know our maturity is low at this point?
Oh, look, I think we can make a fair degree of progress. I think where we're looking at assets that support growth, our project management, which I'll talk about later, will actually look after some of that, because that's where the new asset decisions are made, and having that process followed will be really, really useful. The joining up of your new asset planning, your maintenance and your renewals will take some time. We won't get there before the next long-term plan.
Last question, I guess, how does the asset management piece of this fit in with the broader review that ELT are doing, and this isn't your area, but doing on the community assets? So I know Kim Fell's looking at kind of a broader piece of work, looking at what the community assets are in different parts of the city. Are we going to be able to, how joined up are we going to be able to get to in terms of when that review is supposed to come in to inform the long-term plan?
Yeah, so we will be joined up on that, so we'll make sure that,
right,
we have a good view of that.
That's useful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Siobhan. That's very helpful and informative. And Kim, I think it does reflect, if I can say, the wisdom of some of my colleagues to argue that this should have been done, because I think that's helpful. So I wonder if we could, in a sense, bank that and then look at the broader combination of strategic risks, which is the earlier part of the report, unless anybody wants to raise any exceptions around the COVID. I note your good point. Actually, it's no longer a risk; it's an issue. And actually, the next risk around this is actually whatever is coming down the track at us. So thank you for, if we can sort of, in a sense, complete that loop. Is there any comment you'd like to make about the overall place of the council at the moment from a strategic risk perspective with these great diagrams? I love them.
I'm not really sure what additional comment I would make on this. I guess one of the things that we haven't quite nailed yet really is this differentiation between risk and issues, and how we demonstrate that through this kind of reporting. If we have some kind of way of indicating that, because I guess some of the things we have got here and as almost certain are actually things that we're living through, like the resource and supply chain stuff. So that might be a conversation to have when we review the threats and issues and say, is there things here that we actually shouldn't be considering on a risk framework point of view, but as an ongoing issue reporting through business as usual reporting to ELT and that kind of thing, and the reports that go up to finance and performance committees. So I suppose that's one area that could be something to be looked at here. Because it does make everything kind of up there in the red if it's already happening. But apart from that, it was a really valuable exercise with ELT to talk through that emerging risks thing and just hear the perspectives of how they're feeling things going on across the organisation and external things that are happening. So if there's any comment on that, happy to.
Thank you for that. We've got the big four, as I like them. They're sitting there. And as you say, one of those is actually an issue now. So that is actually a really good point. I mean, it's an issue. Why do we have it as a strategic risk, other than I think we're wanting to reflect it's an ongoing experience, which in itself has a level of risk attached to it. But equally, it's an issue and it's being dealt with. It's manageable. Should it go off the list? I'm open to you coming back to the next meeting saying it shouldn't be there, or to rephrase the risk, Kim, if that makes sense. Don't wait for us to have a workshop. Come and tell us what you're going to do. I think that would be a really good point of view. So the other three to the big four are resource supply, adequate planning and prioritisation, and adequate infrastructure, asset management planning. So we've dealt with at least two of those four. Any comments broadly about the other two, that's resource and supply or inadequate planning, that you guys would like to raise or members you'd like to raise at this point? Yes, Jenny?
Probably more a generic point rather than specific about either of those two, but I guess I really like the exception reporting. I think that's great. But I guess my sense is that I kind of feel like those top 4, I would almost like to see them reported on quarterly because they're so essential, and because they do, like, to me, actually all 4 of them are starting to feel like issues rather than risks. You know, all of them are just, this is the situation that we're in. That said, I'm not sure, you know, it'd be interesting to see what you come back to in terms of talk about how we might report those, because they're issues, I don't want them to disappear. I want to pay more attention to them. And I want to know that I would expect that in those 4 areas that there would be quarterly changes, that there would be work because they're so essential and they're so critical, that I would expect ELT is making progress on those quarterly. So I kind of feel like from an exceptions reporting point of view, I kind of would expect to see those 4 every time. It's
interesting, Jenny, if I could just add in there. When I looked at this in preparation, actually I saw a high link between all 4. So in fact, if I was thinking about, and I'm glad you picked this idea of emergent risk, it's actually the 4 are combined, just about. I mean, look, you know, we can build an argument across all the other ones. So look, perhaps there's just a sense, Kim, that actually I'm inviting you to be free flow in your thinking. Or rather, I should be honest, I think the committee, and if I pick up what you're saying, Jenny, be free flow in reporting, because these 4 are actually not too, they're on the same spectrum of whatever that spectrum is. Essentially, it's delivery. Affordable delivery. They're just so critical. I would have thought. Yeah, Linda.
Should we have had Wellington Water performance as a risk on here? I mean, we've kind of, because it's outsourced, we've not included it. Where would it fall? Matrix.
That more specific reporting does go up to the Finance and Performance Committee. I think those conversations around how Wellington Water is performing, this is a collective of water asset management planning, I guess, rather than necessarily the performance of individual parts of the...
But it's because it's been outsourced to another organisation, it doesn't take away the fact that there is a risk attached to it.
If I can respond, I think the way that that's been handled is specifically it's part of the terms of reference of the Infrastructure Committee, and it has particular focus around the performance. To call out that specific entity as part of our risk framework, I don't think I'd recommend that, because we're talking more on the generic kind of functions and at that strategic level. Probably fair to say, though, that it has had a fair amount of attention of the Infrastructure Committee, Finance Committee in the total, but also through this audit and risk, like having that issue referred, especially around fluoridation. So to call it out as a specific risk for an entity is kind of not being the approach that we've used, but hey, that's at the committee's discretion.
Yes, certainly, Jenny.
I guess my impression sitting on the Infrastructure Committee and the Finance and Performance Committee is everything that I hear about Wellington Water and their performance, I feel like the issues are captured here, because I think it's primarily asset management has been a significant issue with that organisation. We're definitely seeing resource and supply constraints coming through as a significant issue with that organisation. Potentially, planning and prioritisation is something that we've seen coming through. So I guess my take is that I think everything that has been an issue or a risk around Wellington Water is in here. We just haven't labelled any of these things Wellington Water. And that's, as I understand it, kind of a deliberate approach choice rather than anything else. That actually all of those issues are in here somewhere.
I think Linda's asking the obvious, which is that actually sometimes if we take our strategic risk environment, and I stress the risk environment, not the performance of a entity we have a 40% interest in, somewhere you might have to call it. And I think that's the point that you're making, Linda. So I haven't dismissed that as an idea yet from my perspective, Linda. but I am comfortable that the focusing on strategic risks, it is of a second order question. But as we start to think, and I think you already mentioned it, Siobhan, and looking at the asset management stuff, what are some of the drivers of our risk? If we need to have a stronger look at that, we're going to have a talk to Wellington Water. But that's a different story for a wee bit further down the track.
And I think partially that's what I've been trying to capture, some of those conversations that maybe you're not privy to because you're not sitting on the other committees, yeah. Linda, is I've put a couple of links into some of those more specific reports about what's going on with Wellington Water in terms of asset management and performance in the on the second page of the profile, and you should be able to see all those the public documents and records of those meetings and the links to the videos from the meetings as well. So if you're looking for extra assurance about the conversations that are going on at the other committees, you can see what information is going up, and then I guess ask more questions at this committee if you feel like those committees aren't getting to the nub of things.
Yeah. Thanks, Seth. So to be specific here, I'm looking at page 248. I think I'm on the right one. Yes, 248. Which are the two reports you're referring to? Probably sitting in front of my eyes there, but which two?
I don't have the page number in front of me, but on the risk profile, I've got a section right at the bottom of the second page that says relevant reporting to other council committees.
Okay, yes, so it's those reference to the committee minutes.
Yes, yeah. So you can link straight to the actual meetings, watch the video, see the agenda in minutes. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very helpful pointer that we failed to pick up, so well done. Okay, are there any other comments then that people would like to make about our overall strategic risk profile? I think I think actually what you're telling us, particularly about the big four, is you're dealing with them now. I mean, they are day-to-day matters that Siobhan, probably I suspect, particularly for you. I don't suspect. I suspect it's also the other general managers as well. But is critical. We know that it's there. There's nothing more we can say at this stage. Although a lot of the discussion we've had is pointing us towards what can we do to have a better plan next year with the LTP. Well, it'll be the year after, won't it? But it will be starting the planning next year. Yes, Jenny.
I guess one of my questions then is also, I guess, what is the plan for keeping up with the things that are not the highest risk? So I'm looking at things like fraud or another hazard emergency or something. As those may never kind of tip the exceptions reporting, but I would want to know that we're touching base with them at least once a year. So I guess that would be useful, perhaps in the future report, to think about what the processes are going forward to make sure that we are having a touch point. It's our new phrase.
Well, we
did
have a risk review.
We have,
which is probably the great phrase. It's the phrase of the meeting, isn't it? The touch point in terms of we had that chance to look at the full suite at that stage.
But I guess my sense is I feel like it might be more useful to be able to do like one or two at a time. Like when we do when we look at all of them, I feel like I'm not really paying as much attention to fraud or some of the other ones because you're getting pulled to the really critical ones. So I guess that's in my mind is how, as a committee, are we confident that we're keeping in touch with the lower level risks that might have a risk of going under the radar.
Look, I agree. I mean, the Auditor General is so strong on fraud and corruption, and yet equally it's thankfully, not a big issue. But it's still, we treat it as critical. So if it happens, it's an absolute problem. Got to use vernacular, which I'm not allowed to use. Richard, yes.
We have in the past done deep dives into, say, cyber. I'm not sure if we've done one into fraud. We've captured fraud risk assessments elsewhere. But we could do that. I'm conscious if we're doing the big four, we're reporting by exception and doing deep dives, we will cover them all quite quickly in a short space of time. So.
The other thing too is that in the chief officer's what keeps you awake at night session, if some of these are owned by them, they can cover that off as well.
Okay, that's a useful discussion, and I appreciate that. I'm just conscious of our time, and I would like to just, if there's no more questions, just rock over to the risk management team work plan. Again, if I could just take this read, but I just wonder if members had any questions on that. I think you've probably answered well for me my question, Kim, that I've heard, and but I will ask it just so that you can say, yes, Bruce, I've told you. My concern always is our optics are as risk governors, but I'm looking to ELT to to be the lead for the risk management. So this plan clearly has come through them, and if I've understood it correctly, do you have a regular slot with ELT over risk management on an ongoing basis throughout the year?
Yes, we report to them monthly.
I'd love to see that captured here. Okay, because I think you're underselling the work that you do, and I should not blaming you, but I'm about to say underselling the work that ELT do. I think it's really important. It's important to me to know that ELT are engaged in risk management, and I was looking again. You can see I'm attracted by colour and diagrams. The right-hand panel on page 248 of my agenda, I think it's probably about page 2 of your plan. I was screaming to see ELT and big lights there as being part of your, and unless I've read it too quickly, I didn't pick it up. So I'd be keen that we don't lose sight of that. That's a really key point for me to know.
It is in there, lost in the detail, I guess, and the kind of the step-by-step things we will do.
Yeah.
But yeah, happy to highlight it in more detail on the in the fancy diagram.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that's good. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Any other questions people would like to raise then at this stage around the risk program? Makes look good common sense to me. Great. Can we go to the resolutions then, please, if that's the case, which is that we receive the information. And thank you, Siobhan, for a starring role there in amongst Richard and Kim's report. And we approve, and I think, Roy, I'm going to accept that we can approve the risk management teamwork plan for the year. For the sake of the time, I'm going to move that motion. Over a seconder, please. I'm going to go Linda this time. Please take your remotes and vote accordingly, please. Do we capture the folk that are outside the meeting? We do? Oh, sweet. There we go. That's cracker. I'm going to say it's gone. Just waiting. Liz, go do your voting. Oh, yep, there we go. Brilliant. That's superb. Okay. Great. If we can take that on board, but I know, Emily, I think it's you that's going to talk me through the action tracking, please.
Thanks, Stephen.
Oh, Stephen is.
Yes, look, a pretty straightforward paper. Everything's green. Everything's been completed since the last meeting, and that's really for noting.
Okay, so I will move from the chair that we receive the information. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Jenny. Take your remotes again. Oh, remotes is such a boring word. We've got to give them names. I don't know what I can't even vote here. Can I? Oh, I am now. There we go. Thank you. Right, if I could then please... wait for everybody. We are doing the forward audit program. Don't go away, Richard. I don't think it's you, Richard.
Perhaps I can speak to that quickly. It really reflects that 3-year forward work program that the committee signed off. I'd just note that, as earlier in the meeting, there are a couple of one workshop in August around the annual report, which obviously we haven't noted here because it's not part of a formal meeting, but you'll see it flow through into the 14th of September in terms of the draft annual report. But
and we should probably reflect that the June 2022 meeting is actually May 2022, as in now. Okay. Rightio, that's fine. It's good to see that ticking over. Obviously, we aren't getting in front of ourselves. We know that was this one other meeting left in the Terminating, and it's a big one. So we've got a strong focus on that. Okay, can I just move that we receive the information? Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Linda. Again, if you could take your remotes and vote accordingly to your preference, please. Brilliant. Okay, can we just move to the procedural motion to move into public excluded? I think we've all had a chance to look at the agenda. We know what's in them, and we've got printed in front of us, or we've had for us the reasons why. Again, for the sake of the meeting, I will move that the relevant motions so that we can move into public excluded. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Jenny. If you could again take your remotes and vote accordingly to your preference. You're beating me to it, Linda. You're quicker on the pushing the button than I am. Right, are we in? Yeah, okay. You just let us know when that's going. please. That'd be great.
Unu hia, ki te uru tapu nui. Kia wātea, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū. Koia rā e rongo, whakaeria aki ki runga. Kia wātea, ai rā, kua wātea.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think the committee just wants to spend 5 minutes together. I'll get my instructions as a chair, which I think is probably fair enough.